name is Thamara Faustine and I'm going to present you a brief explanation about the modernism era. So let's get started. The modernism era started or occurred in 1920 until 1945. What are the characteristics? First, it has been marked by significant development in the field of science, literature, arts, politics, warfare, technology, and many more. It is also known as the age of globalization and discovery, and the age of interrogation and anxiety. So, the 20th century is called the age of interrogation and anxiety because the scientific revolution and changing social, moral, political, and economic conditions have shaken man's faith in the authority of religion and church and the established order. The persistent mood of skepticism and interrogation has increased disproportionately in one of a new set of values. Moreover, modern industrial and technical progress has given birth to the spirit of competition. Everybody wants to come out successful in the rat race, but only a few are crowned with laurels. This failure, coupled with the complexity of modern life, has resulted in frustration and anxiety. This tendency recur in the literature of this period. Then the third, it also saw the rise of European powers and their dominance over colonial powers. Next, the new economic theories of economists like Marshall and Keynes, who raised their voice against poverty, and the changed pattern of the social behavior influenced literature of this period. And this period was completely overshadowed by the two world wars. So the first world war that it's happened in 1914 until 1919 was the era of depression and of want and employment. The second world war that is happened until 1945 broke out, and this conflict not only to the military forces but also the civilian population that were intimately involved. Next is the modernist literature. So what are the characteristics? First, modernism is a style of movement in the arts that aims to break with classical and traditional forms. This movement originated when some writers felt that they required a new form of writing to express their ideologies and outlook toward lives. Next, people started to regard Victorian age as a hypocritical age, having superficial and mean ideals. So the writers of this age refuted the ideas and the belief of previous era. Next is the growing interest in the poor and the working classes. So this period marks with the beginning of the end of supremacy of the middle classes and the middle class standard of thought and writing. Next, it is the literature of this period influenced by the economic and social changes. The Marxism was the most powerful influence. Various manifestations of socialism, just like the Fabian socialism, Christian socialism, Marxist materialism, and many more, came into existence and influenced the author of this period. Then the psychology and literature. The new psychological researches influenced literature of the 20th century. Freud put great emphasis on the power of the unconscious to affect conduct. Intellectual convictions appear to be rationalization of emotional needs. He came to the various conclusions as relating to the normal mind, which are the basis of psychoanalysis, such as the existence of an unconscious element in the mind, which influence consciousness and the conflict in between various sets of forces. Also, the importance of the child's semi-consciousness of sex as a factor in mental development. Then, just like what I've said before, it is also characterized by self-conscious break with traditional ways of writing in both poetry and prose fiction. Next, the characteristic are, of course, it is influenced by the First World War. It is also rejected the conventional styles of prose and poetry. The trends are the stream of consciousness, which I will explain later, then the surrealism, cubism, futurism, expressionism, imagism, and there's also the individualism. So in the modernist literature, the individual is more interesting than society. Specifically, modernist writers were fascinated with how the individual adapted to the changing world. Then the experimentation. The modernist writers broke free of the odd forms and techniques. Poet, Poets abandoned traditional rhyme schemes and wrote in the free verse. The novelists defined all expectation. Writers mix images from the past with the modern language and themes, creating a collage of styles. The inner working of consciousness were a common subject for modernists. This preoccupation led to the form of narration called stream of consciousness, where the joined-up view of the novel meanders in a pattern resembling human thought. Authors just like the James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, along with the poets T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, who are well known for their experimental modernist work, and the absurdity. The carnage of two world wars profoundly affected writers of this period. For many writers, the world was becoming a more absurd place every day. The mysteriousness of life was being lost in the rush of daily life. The senseless violence of World War II was yet more evident than humanity had lost its way. Modernist authors depicted this absurdity in their works. And there's also symbolism. So the symbolism was not a new concept in literature, right? But the modernist particular use of symbols was an innovation. They left much more to the reader's imagination than earlier writers, leading to open-ended narrative with multiple interpretation. Next is the formalism. So writers of the modernist period saw literature more as a craft than a flowering of creativity. They believed that poems and novels were constructed from smaller parts instead of the organic internal process that earlier generation had described. Next is the characteristic of the work. The first is the novel. So novel becomes the most popular work in the 20th century in this period. The first is the variety and complexity of themes. So novel had been written practically on all possible themes and subjects which appeal to the modern readers. There are the psychological novel and new genres of novel, just like the biographical novel, regional novel, satirical novel, and many more. Then the realism. So the modern novel represents in the doubts, uncertainties, frustration, and anxieties of the modern man. It is therefore pessimic in tone. The modern novel contains a large-scale criticism and condemnation of contemporary values and civilization. Next is the stream of consciousness novel. The phrase stream of consciousness was first used by William James in Principles of Psychology. The stream of consciousness technique was influenced by the symbolism of the French poet and the novelist Marcel Proust, by the new research in the psychology by Freud, and by the writings of William James and Henry Bergson. Then the modern novel represents realistically the doubts, conflicts, that just like what I've said before, and then it entirely broke free from the Victorian inhibition of sex. Next is the poetry. So the poetry in this period is a sort of revolution against the traditional thought and types of the Victorian era poetry. So there is the tradition and experiment in modern poetry, and also the imagism. So imagism is with the change in the subject matter, the change in poetic technique was inevitable. The new experience needed as a new style and a speech for its expression. Images insisted on the use of hard, dry, and precise visual image, the use of the exact word from the language of the common speech, and to produce poetry that is hard and clear. Then there is also the prose. So the prose in this era, the modern writer aims to achieving simplicity and clarity of expression and carefully avoid all literary artifice impeding his flow of thoughts. And the essay, the modern essayist deals with all types of topic under the sun. He has imparted the new dimension to the development of prose style. Then the drama. So there is also the development of theaters. It is influence of cinema, radio, and television, and also the foreign influence also in a drama in this era. Next is the famous modernist writer. Of course, there is so many writers of this era, but I will just come into six writers, just like the David Herbert Lawrence with his Sons and Lover, then James Joyce with the Ulysses, and the T.S. Eliot with the Murder in the Cathedral, George Bernard Shaw with the Mrs. Warren Perfection, then William Butler Yeats with the Lands of Heart Desire, and Virginia Woolf with Mrs. Dalloway. Next is the work. The example is the Ulysses. Has been called as a demonstration and summation of the entire modernist movement and was the most experimental work he wrote. He even tried to eliminate punctuation. He used other ways to give a specific rhythm to what he was writing, for example, giving the specific shape of the word in order to receive the emotion and the rhythm he wanted to give without using the traditional punctuation, and it was something new in this era. And this is my references. Okay, so that's all for today's videos. I'm sorry if I make many mistakes during the presentation. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.